Welcome to the first annual Town Meeting 101, where we just demystify town meeting. We don't really have a plan for this. We're kind of just going to go through everything that we've put together, and this is your time to ask questions once we go through everything. So I guess we'll start with this. What is town meeting? It's a gathering of town's eligible voters. It's a legislative body in Massachusetts for our towns. It's charged with deciding the direction in which way our town goes. Town meeting is tasked with the important decisions like approving the town's budget, creating or updating bylaws, funding capital improvement projects, and creating new boards and committees. I think most of you know where we hold the town meeting. It's at Sandwich Middle High School in the auditorium, 365 Quaker Meeting House Road. It's always the first Monday in May at 7 o'clock.
Sean, before we go, do you want to just introduce the panel?
Yes, we do have some people here smarter than I that will be able to answer some questions as well. So we've got to my left, we have Town Manager Bud Dunham. We have Taylor White, Town Clerk, and we have Crystal Smith from the Finance Committee. So as we go on, there'll be different parts that involve each member here, and they'll be able to answer your questions as well. So town meeting is your meeting. As I've said before, it's the purest form of democracy. You have direct control of the direction of the meeting, the outcome of the votes, and ultimately what and how the articles are passed, amended or rejected. Well, there's two types of town meetings. There's an annual town meeting, which is the one we have coming up in May, held yearly on the first Monday, and it's written by the bylaws and town charter. All financial decisions that are made at that meeting take effect on the new fiscal year, which is July 1. Articles include approval of the upcoming fiscal year operating budget, setting limits on revolving funds, zoning changes, and CPA funding appropriations. Now, the special town meeting is usually held in the fall. We don't have a specific date for it, but it usually is October, November, give or take scheduling. Those financial decisions are effective the next day. So, and they impact the current fiscal year's budget. Those meetings are sometimes necessary to address business that comes up in between the two annual meetings, budget shortfalls, anything that we need to adjust for, zoning changes, things like that. Who can vote at a town meeting? If you're a Sandwich voter, you can vote, as long as you're registered 10 days prior to the meeting. If you're not sure about that, you can contact Mr. White over here, and he can, and his office can let you know if you are registered and what you can do to register. Who participates in the meeting? The Town Moderator, myself, runs the meeting, calling the meeting to order, declaring the outcome of all votes. The moderator is elected during the annual town election in May and serves a term of 3 years. Select Board is also involved in this because they make the motions on each article, and they're comprised of 5 elected officials serving 3-year terms and are the town's executive officers. The Select Board is the executive body within the town with the authority to call for a town meeting. Prior to the meeting, they review and approve the warrant and make recommendations on the articles at one of their regular meetings. During town meeting, each member of the board takes turns reading the articles into the record. The town clerk is also involved. Town clerk officially oversees the keeping. The
reading of the articles.
Yes.
Is it required that all of that mumbo jumbo gets repeated over and over?
No.
No, there's so many words, it's so wordy, that the first reading is kind of an overview.
So there is.
And the second reading's got all kinds of numbers that usually don't match what's in our paperwork by the time we meeting comes up.
Right, so I, as the moderator, try to read just a summary of it. The Board of Selectmen will then read a much larger, much more in-depth wording of the question. But we do put more information in there so you guys have it. So.
We have it, but the numbers change. If it's, sometimes the numbers that are in the article are not the same numbers that show up on the board because something has been adjusted or changed along the way.
Yeah, I think we're going to touch on some of that a little bit later,
Okay.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so you know, if the audience has a question, raise your hand. I'm going to bring the mic because we're taping this. Sandwich TV is taping this, so we can hopefully use this in perpetuity. So just make sure we get your questions in the mic. Hopefully it'll help future people who watch the presentation. Thank you.
And unlike at town meeting, you don't have to state your name or address. So, but the town clerk he records all the votes and meeting minutes, and he's responsible for checking the voters in prior to the meeting, which now, especially with our electronic voting system, they hand out the clickers and everything and make sure everybody's all set and ready to go. Town manager, who was appointed by the select board, he oversees the day-to-day operations of town departments and acts as the chief administrative officer. Town manager prepares the town meeting warrant in conjunction with the department heads and town council. During the town meeting, the town manager is present to answer any questions related to warrant articles, which we see quite often. We also have town council, which is the town's attorney. He represents and advises the town on all legal matters and the proper administration of town meetings. So, if somebody raises a question and it's of a legal nature, we can turn to town council and really get the right answer. If I have a question on something, I can even turn to the town council and he can assist with that. So, and then we have the finance committee, who Crystal is a representative of, and they're appointed by myself, the town moderator. And they're tasked with overseeing preparation of all financial articles presented at town meeting, including the annual operating budget. The committee is made up of 9 members serving 3-year terms. And prior to the town meeting, the committee works with the town manager, finance director, select board, and school committee to prepare the annual operating budget and any other financial articles that may appear on the warrant. The committee makes recommendations at town meeting on all financial articles. And you may notice at the town meeting, we'll read an article, the Board of Selectmen will read the article, we'll look to the finance committee and they'll say, we approve or disapprove of this article by a vote of, whatever it is, say it's unanimous. So they're gonna let you know what they thought of it and how they voted.
Will they ever tell us why? I'm not just from the people that are sitting around
Yep.
in the heavens.
Hey,
where
Pam, you
it's-
just broke the rule. You know how you raise your hand so we can get your question. There you go.
No, do we have a reason, other than just we approve, or we disapprove, or we approve 4-3 or something? Just so that there's more information than just yes or no.
Right. It certainly can happen, but I'm actually going to defer to the vice chair of the finance committee for that one.
When we do our votes, we go through everything, and then if anybody has any yes or no's or why it should be or why it shouldn't be, we would listen to that, and then we take a vote, and for the most part, it's unanimous. And then it's either, if we, like last time we voted, there were 7 members, and it was either 7-1 or 6-2. So there hasn't been a huge, split or a huge disagree since I've been on the board. But sometimes it's that someone didn't like something, or they didn't think that the school committee was going to fulfill something, or they wanted more information from a committee that they didn't get, or with police or fire, maybe that they didn't agree with something that they were going to do. But that could be also on a personal level, that they were like, all right, well, I don't think it's best for the town. So I don't think that it would be something that we would say, oh, John from the finance committee disagreed with warrant number 16 because X.
Not necessarily, who, because that really wouldn't be fair, but just if you unanimously agree, usually that's fine. But if it's something that you don't recommend, why?
And I can speak to that too. As
Yeah.
part of the warrant, oftentimes the finance committee does a finance committee message, and it often appears in there. And during that, I've seen over the years, the finance committee will sort of summarize their activities and maybe make comments on certain articles during that committee message. And that typically happens at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, since I've been the vice chair, there hasn't been anything that has been non-agreed on or not unanimous. We've been pretty much even keel throughout.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The finance committee meetings are public. So anybody can go if you're really interested in what's happening with finance. You can go to the meetings, and their minutes are public. So you can get the minutes, from the town website. I think you can.
And
So the information's out there.
Yeah, and we added, we decided to add a second public forum this year in the beginning and at the end. So we will, we start out, we, do the pledge, approve any minutes, and then if anybody that's there would like to say something, we invite them up to, make comments. And then at the end, we also invite anybody that's still there to also make comments, and it's recorded and airs on Sandwich Television. So it can be rewatched too, if you have any questions. And we invite, and you're all invited. We would love to have, more of a, a show there for our meetings.
Thank you. So once I present an article, the select board will then read the motion on the article. So if, say, I say Article 1, approve the annual operating budget of such and such, the Charlie Holden or whoever is next on there will come and say the Board of Selectmen, the motion to approve this article, and they'll read a much more in-depth article on that. They'll give the recommendation, and then I will ask town meeting if anybody wishes to speak on the article. So that's when you guys get to rise to shine. You can get up, approach the mic, the podium, state your name, your address, and then begin speaking. And that's how democracy happens. So how long can you speak? This is always the big question. So your initial comment, you get five minutes to speak on an article. If you do a follow-up a second time, you have 2 minutes. We do have an official timekeeper, and we have a nice little clock that we got for the last town meeting. It's right there, makes it very visible so you can see it, so you're not trying to figure out, am I speaking too long, too short? So that way you can see what you have. If the speaker goes over the limit, I'm going to very nicely let you know that your time is wrapped up, and then we'll move on to the next person. So we made a change at the last town meeting. The podium used to be over to your left of the stage, my right. Now I put it dead center, and I just wanted to make it so we didn't have people with any mobility issues having to go all the way across the room to get to the podium. So it's right there in the center, and you can like address everybody that's on the stage pretty easily. So, but one thing we don't allow when you're at the podium is personal attacks or comments outside the scope of the matter at hand, and I will rule them out of order.
John, can I stop for 1 second?
Yes.
I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. Is there anyone here who has not been to town meeting? Okay, we got a couple, so that's good. So when Sean's talking about, it's obviously the auditorium at the Sandwich High School is where we're talking. That's where the town meetings are held. We have an auxiliary room. If there's ever more than, say, 1,000 people at the meeting,
Let's make that happen, people.
Yeah, we put them over in the gymnasium. We have an assistant moderator at that point. But if you're not familiar with the area, it's inside the gymnasium. Inside the auditorium at the Sandwich High School. Sorry.
How do you vote? Well, that's a recent change as well. If you've ever been to town meeting, you remember a lot of times it was just a simple voice vote, which could sometimes get, you couldn't tell. It wasn't very decisive. So we had a really high-tech way of deciding that, and everybody had a paper card, and we would the town moderator would appoint counters to go out and count each section twice. So as you can imagine, that took a substantial amount of time. So now we have this electronic voting. It's simple as we tell you the voting is open, you press yes or no, and then after a period of time, 30 seconds, the voting closes, and it's all tabulated right there on the screen for you. So I think it's a lot smoother, and I think everybody's found it to be pretty easy to utilize. I'm going to hand this one over to Bud for this one.
So if you've ever been to town meeting or you read the warrant, so I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The warrant is the legal document that spells out what we're voting on in the evening. There's a couple of introductory pages in the beginning of the warrant, and then there's the meat of the warrant. And then at the end, most years, we have more reference material in the back. than we do pages of the actual legal warrant. And so that's one thing that we've tried to beef up through the years. So if someone's coming to town meeting and hasn't watched the select board or finance committee meetings for the last many months, they'd be able to turn to something in the back and just see a simple explanation of which articles are going to be discussed that night. One thing we thought that would be helpful, when we word the warrants, it's a little bit clunky in terms of how you normally speak to one another in public or at different things. So I think one thing that everyone should realize is the warrant itself is a legal document. So we're sort of used to how town council likes to see articles structured, but before it gets printed and finalized, town council reviews the whole warrant at least once, gets back comments, and then we incorporate those changes. So I just wanted to show you an example, and it's up front, but also I think on each of your chairs I left a one-page handout. And I tried to highlight in red like the 3 parts of any financial article that town council wants us to have. So you hear this and see this when we make the motions, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds. The reason we use that phrase, raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds, is that covers any possible way to fund an article. So as you would think, you want to keep your options open on how you fund what it is you're doing. Then you identify an amount, but town council also always wants you to say, or any other amount, in case something changes between the time that the warrant's posted, which has to be a minimum of 2 weeks before town meeting. We usually try to post it a couple of days before that, just to be safe. For example, we're posting the one for May 5th tomorrow. And then it says the reason that the funds are being appropriated for, and that's usually quite specific. And then it says, or take any action relative thereto. That's really important. I think if you go to any town in Massachusetts, the end of any article will say that or something similar. In case something changes, it can be amended as long as it's within the scope of the article, as Sean was saying previously. And it has to be within the scope, and that's some of the time when we would use town council's advice. If someone proposes to change something that's way outside the scope, a simple example is like Article 2 is usually the big operating budget. If someone wants to change the capital budget, that's usually not for 3 or 4 articles later. So that would be outside the scope of the article that's been presented. So again, there's 3 components that town council recommends, and I try to put those in red. So flexibility on the funding source, flexibility on the amount, only if we have to do those 2 things, and then flexibility to adjust the motion as long as it's within the scope. So almost every financial article follows that sort of relative structure. But as we've said a couple of times, it's the motion that locks all that down and is very specific. So we will say raise and appropriate instead of transfer. Or if we know it's a transfer, we'll say transfer and say the source. We'll say the final amount. That doesn't get changed once the motion's made. And then it's very specific. So on the back, I printed an actual article from a year ago, and it talks about transferring money from free cash, which is one of our funding sources. And in this case, it was to make some improvements on doing some work on public roads and infrastructure. So you can sort of see the motion up above talks about giving you the flexibility, but when when you see the motion above, it locks it in on transferring and appropriating a specific amount, where it's coming from free cash, what it's going to be used for. And then you'll notice in the motion, it takes away that or any action relative thereto because it locks in what the funding is going to be for. So a couple things I'd highlight. Not every article is financial. It's a requirement in the state of Massachusetts, which is a good thing. Every community has to have a balanced budget by July 1st, the start of the next fiscal year, to open their doors, whether it's the police department or the school department. And so if you remember during COVID, we had to cancel the annual town meeting. We had to make sure we held a special at that point before June 30th. Otherwise, technically, we couldn't have opened our doors on July 1st. So we had one, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd week in June. It's really rare when we don't appropriate a budget. I don't think it's happened in the last 35, 40 years. It's also unique that local government's the only level of government, state or federal, that has to have a balanced budget. So in a way that's good, and that's why we work closely with the Finance Committee and the Select Board to try to do a lot of that dirty work of the months leading up to town meeting. So I could get into more when we get questions, but just thought I'd show like why we word things a certain way, why town council wants to see things a certain way. And one thing I'd highlight is we put all the reference material in the back because the actual articles is a legal document, so the informational stuff is at the end. Some towns intersperse it, and I think it gets confusing. And so our town council, who represents more than a third of the cities and towns in the state, has always recommended put that stuff in the back. Don't mix it in with all the different articles because it can get confusing.
Very good, thank you. So there are two different types of votes at town meeting. There's a majority vote and a 2/3 vote. And they have different types of questions have different requirements. So majority vote, pretty simple. If you have 100 voters, 51 vote yes, then the motion passes. 2/3, you have 100, 67 yes votes, the motion passes.
Sean, just to interrupt too,
Yes.
a lot of people, the type of vote is important. Oftentimes when the town is looking to change zoning bylaws, it's not set in stone, there's certain things that are a majority vote, but a lot of times zoning bylaw changes require a 2/3 majority. There are certain exceptions to that. There's other motions that are made throughout town meeting to definitely postpone or to move the question, and those have different vote requirements as well. And the moderator will announce that prior to the votes, whether or not the vote that's being taken is a majority vote or a 2/3 majority vote ahead of the vote, so we all on the same page.
It's also worth noting that the state just passed down a change to zoning, so it's actually now a simple majority. So we don't
Well,
need the 2/3.
on certain things.
Yeah. So different types of motions you can make at town meeting. Point of order. You don't need a second for that. Just directed at the moderator concerning procedure of the meeting. So if you don't think that I'm letting someone speak too long, or I'm cutting people off too early, or if somebody had a question about what I was doing, they could make a point of order. There's no second for that. Moving the question, that's an important one. Many times we'll have debates on certain articles, go round and round and round, and people are kind of ready to vote on it. So somebody would get up and say, I move the question. That does need a second from the voters. So you would need a second on that, and that is a 2/3. So we would have a 2/3 vote on that just to move the question, then we would take the vote. So, yes.
You have to come to the podium to move the question?
Preferably yes, but if it's loud enough, we don't have to. No, I will allow it. Give or take in the moment.
And to add to that, you can't make a comment about the article and then
Right.
move it afterwards. So you have to come to the podium and say, I propose to move the question. And you can't, say your piece and then do it because you'd have the last word.
That's
so it has
that's
to
an
be
important
somebody,
point.
Yeah.
Right.
So it has to be a fresh person going up and moving the question.
In the past, we've had issues with move the question, it's been seconded, or something other than that.
Yep.
And people there's so much going on, so many voices, that you need to tell us what we're voting on.
So one of the things I try to do is I try to keep a little flow chart on the podium.
You did a really good job.
Thank you.
But we need to know
Yep.
always if it's something going in ahead of the full article. What are we voting on? And sometimes you need to tell us what are the ramifications of voting yes or no, because some of the things can be kind of.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So in a situation where we're moving the question, I will make it clear that this is just to get to the vote. Taylor, you might be able to answer this one a little bit. Is there a way to can we pop that up on the screen real time, that we're moving the question?
With the
or-
use of the clicker system, in the case of, we're going to go with the move the question. It'll be up on the screen. The question will say, motion to move the question. Will say 2/3 majority. The moderator will open up voting. Voting will take 30 seconds. At the end of the voting, it'll pop up whether it passed or not. So we're trying to make it clear, and I know the moderator has an effort to communicate that clear to town meeting, as well as having it up on the screen with the new electronic voting system we have. So hopefully it's a lot clearer than it has been in the past.
I would just add that I think the times it's been most confusing is when, say there's a motion to amend on an article. So then the debate starts on the amendment, not on the actual article. And then someone says, move the question, but you're moving the question on the amendment. So once you vote on moving the question, then you have to go back and vote on the amendment. Yeah, but then you got to go back to the main one. So it's really 3 votes sometimes when that's done. And that's sometimes where it's gotten a little confusing, but I think you're right. Like, collectively, we should try to find a way and just to make sure that people realize there's multiple votes needed here. So,
And that's for me staying on, as my little flow chart at the podium comes into play.
I'm wondering if this is the same instance that I had a problem with a couple of years ago with the bottle bill. I had just got up to the podium. I had a really nice, I was trying to be conciliatory. And the bottle bill was very important to me to get rid of the single use. And I was cut off, I know by whom, because people were tired of hearing about it. But I was quite furious because to me that is not democratic. I mean, I know if you get enough people voting, they've had enough. But if it's something that's important, and not somebody who's a little crazy, and I've seen a couple of people who are a little crazy. I've seen people who talk way too long. I understand that, but that's the price of democracy. But I had something important to say about an important subject, and I was, matter of fact, they were going to escort me out by the police. I was kind of waiting for that. I thought, you just go ahead and try. But there's something wrong about that in a democracy when we can't finish an argument, especially on something that's important.
No, we got you. Well, I mean, the moderator can attest this, but the open town meeting is a very unique thing, in that there's a lot of places in the country that
get-
New England is still retains this open town meeting, a representative town meeting style of government. I often refer to town meeting as the Wild West of Yankee politics. I mean, it is kind of a rough and tumble place. In your case, I understand your frustration. I don't remember that specific. There was a lot of bottle meetings we had. I don't remember specifically. I don't think you were the moderator at
I
the
was
time,
not, no.
And it is.
I don't remember.
The first part of this is your meeting. Now, a town meeting as a whole, and I think this is what happened in your situation, is town meeting has said, we've heard enough, and I know that didn't help you out, but I think town meeting said, listen, we've heard enough discussion, we're ready to vote on it. And I believe at that time it was probably someone who made a motion to move the question, and then it was forwarded. So I understand your frustration, but that you have to go with the majority of the room, and the attendees are setting the meeting in that direction, one way or the other.
But the trouble is, if the majority of people who are against the bottle bill are trying to shut it down because they don't want to hear anymore, they just want to go ahead and vote on it, that's also not fair.
Well, like I said, it's the Wild West of New England government. But at least you're attending. We like that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait till the next meeting.
Good, we'll get you there.
I just want to back up a little bit. I want to talk about the voting clickers.
Yes.
We have to assume there will be people in that building to vote who have never used those before. And last meeting, it was just kind of assumed everybody knew how to do it. And I know when we first went and used them for the first time, we got to practice, and it showed you if your vote had counted by looking at it. And I think a lot of people weren't sure about if their vote had gone through. So I think it's something that needs to be done.
You know what? I'll make a change right here. I think maybe as the meeting starts, we might do just a quick test vote on, and I think I know we can make that happen. So I think that's a great idea. So actually, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Appreciate it. There is one other type of motion, and this one can get crunchy to say the least. Is reconsideration. There is a second required on it. It is debatable, and then it needs a majority vote to pass. So what a reconsideration is to introduce new information that may change the vote of an article that has already been voted on. It can only be made by a voter who was on the winning side of the original vote. Now, I think a good example of that happened in this town, I believe, and I'm gonna just guess here, but I'm gonna say about 10 years ago, the meals tax. Was that
I think it was.
maybe
yeah.
10 years
Yeah,
ago?
Yeah.
It originally had failed at the beginning of the meeting, but then somebody who had originally voted in favor or with it failing came back and made the motion to reconsider. And at that point, they debated, it came back, and that's where we got the additional 0.75 meals tax on our thing. So that can happen, and that requires people to stay to the end of the meeting too.
But where's the new information? You see what I'm saying? They can say, make a motion to reconsider, and everybody votes, but unless we meet the criteria that there's, why are you making
the new information in that instance would be just the new debate. New information just be new information brought to the podium in the form of opinion even. So, like Taylor said, it's the wild west of
Well,
of
and
Yankee
also the motion
politics.
for reconsideration, it's not as necessary. The town meeting can vote it down.
Right.
And so if it's town meeting's decision, and it is a majority vote in this case, whether or not they want to reopen that debate on that issue.
Right.
So it's really the meeting's decision.
So,
Can I say something?
yes, go ahead.
Here's something like we brainstorm a lot about internally, like getting ready for town meeting. By the time we get to town meeting, we talk about these things a lot. We feel like we're ready to explain things like unbiasedly for voters if they have a question. And so, for lack of a better word, we put together all these binders and cheat sheets, but we don't want to bore people. And a great example is the cell tower on top of the high school roof. We've adopted something through town meeting where that money gets given to the school to spend on their exterior fields. I mean, it says it right in the motion. Do we really need to explain it? So I think one thing we talk about a lot at our preparation meeting leading up to town meeting is, we literally could say something on every article, but we also don't want to kill momentum or not even get momentum. So we tend to focus on the big ones. Like the budget is big enough, almost $100 million, we should talk about that. So we do. The zoning is usually complex enough, and unless you're a town planner, you don't deal with it every day. So we want to hear a report on that. But when we transfer money from the CPA account, like we do every year, do you really want to hear anything? And that's almost a question for you guys as we progress today. But most of the time, I would say in the near future, we've been leaning towards not talking unless we see people are getting up with questions, and then we might say, okay, explain it, and maybe that would help address the problem. It's a fine line, and we struggle with that.
It's the challenge of juggling, presenting information and being, respectful of everybody's time and being efficient with that time. So it's, trying to juggle that. There's a couple other motions. There's one that's to indefinitely postpone. So I guess the nice way of saying that is just making it go away till someone brings it back at a future town meeting. It does require a second. It's debatable, and it does require a majority vote to pass. Advance an article. Say there's one article that you're really passionate about. Say it's Article 10, and you want to bring this up. You want it to move to Article 2. You could make a motion to advance an article, and again, so it'd be moving it up from 10 to 2. It needs a second. There is debate that can be debated, and it does require a majority vote. And I have seen that happen in the past, fairly recently too. I think it was
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the amendment. Say you want to amend, say, a budget article or something like that, which could get very, very crunchy. But you could make an amendment to say, they want to move 5,000. You want to move 10 to this account or something. You could make the amendment to that. Again, requires a second. It's open for debate. But we would need a majority vote to pass. Sorry.
An amendment?
An amendment? Yes. I didn't hear what you.
No, just
In
doesn't
writing.
it have to be in writing?
Yes, yeah. But they aren't always.
No.
Since Taylor is standing.
Yes, let's let Taylor talk.
It's not very important, but I'm just curious about something.
all
In the
important.
beginning, when all the articles are read, there's always a second person who reads through it again, and I find that incredibly boring. Is it necessary? Oh, did I?
So,
I'm sorry about that.
so I will, as the moderator, I will read a summary of it, and then I pass it on to the Board of Selectmen, who then reads a much more detailed version of it. Legally, for legal reasons, we have to at least have. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna let Bud.
Yeah, so like, this is just my personal opinion. I personally think you could say Article 2 is always our big budget article. Instead of reading the motion, which is purposely long, and I'll explain why, you could just say, this is to vote the operating budget for FY26. That's what I would say. And then I would let the select board read the motion, and then one of us will explain what it's about. The budget is probably far and away the most complex motion of the night, because instead of taking money from just one source, in addition, we transfer money from like a dozen different sources. And by law, we have to list every one of those. So they're actually listed in the warrant, which we try to highlight in our presentation. And then there's also a state law that says if any elected official gets $1, you have to identify that in the motion. So far and away, the longest motion of the night is the budget. But the simplest way to explain it is, okay, we're voting on the FY26 budget, and then someone would read the motion. In a case like that, like town staff would explain what it's about. And then because it's so confusing, I think the last many years we've taken time at the end to say, this motion's really confusing and here's why, just so people understand it a little better. But I think you're also right, like a lot of the articles are really straightforward. It's almost like we could just say, okay, this is to transfer
Right.
money from the cell tower at the high school so they can use it on outside fields. Then the select board would read the motion and we wouldn't have to say as much. That's just my personal opinion, to keep it moving.
Let's talk to council about that too.
I think we
when,
could.
when we have the
Yeah,
pre-town meeting. I think
yeah.
that's not a bad
And
idea.
some of the motions that are like the planning board motion, like if you
Yep.
look at the zoning articles for this year, I think both of them are like 4 pages each, like long. All we do say, we say, will the town vote to amend the Sandwich Protected Zoning Bylaws, Article blank, Section blank, as printed in the warrant, with additions highlighted in bold and subtractions highlighted in strike through, and then we just say, as printed in the warrant under Article 22. So we don't read the whole thing. In a way, that's sort of condensed.
Maybe get a professional actor to stand up there.
Yeah, we could.
Read it in faster, but
We could, yeah. An auctioneer, that wouldn't be bad.
There we go.
Is advance the article required? Are you required to allow that?
It's a legal
Because-
motion. Yeah.
I'm the one that usually speaks up against it because it's like, is this article more important than these articles before it? And what normally happens if an article gets advanced is at the end of that article,
Everybody walks out.
400 people stand up, interrupt the whole meeting, and make their way out the door. And, it interrupts the whole flow of the meeting. And if you're in the heavens, you can't see a blasted thing, nor can you hear over the din of them all getting out of their seats. It's annoying, and the fact that somebody thinks that their article, unless it's going with an article, we've had it so that something was moved ahead, so that it would go with something else.
Yep.
Because it made more sense, but not for a group to move an article forward just so they can all get up and leave by 9.
Yeah, so it definitely is a legal motion. It is one that can be done. But I do remember, I'm dating myself, probably about 12 years ago, I think we had, I forget what it was, and the motion passed or failed. Everybody got up. And I remember one of our selectmen at the time, I believe it was Linnell Grunman, she asked everybody, is that the only one that's important to you? So,
I was on the Council on Aging, and people were disappointed because the money went to the bank
Yeah.
instead of here. And just a whole slew of people got up
Yep.
And the moderator said, I would suggest you hang around if you're in no problem. And sure enough, it came up again and we voted it in.
Right.
But people were so angry at losing the money to this place that they got up en masse and walked out.
I just add that we didn't lose the money on this place. Look what we built. Like, this is a heck of a lot better than that bank building. So we got a lot. Yeah. No, yeah. And I would say that this is really important. Like, the warrant is a document of the select board. They're the chief executive officers of the town. The chair of the select board, Charlie Holden, is here. So it's their warrant. They're the only ones who can decide what articles go on the warrant, with the exception of petition articles, which there's requirements on getting those, and any zoning articles that the planning board holds a public hearing on and votes to include. Even if the select board don't support a zoning article, which is rare, they have to print those if the planning board's held a public hearing and voted on them.
Right.
And then just because we work on that with the board, Heather Harper, the assistant town manager, is here. Like, we purposely try to schedule, if you look at the warrant, the first dozen or so articles are all financial. Because we need, just for that reason I said before, we want to knock off all the money articles in the beginning, because we want to make sure by July 1 we're good to go, we can open our doors. It sounds foolish, but a lot of us will get each other's eye whenever Article 2, which is the big budget, passes, because I hate to say it, even if the other articles fail, the main thing that we needed to do for the town for the upcoming year is done. And so we're always a little bit relieved when we get past that article, because in a weird way, our work's been done for the year in terms of setting us up to be able to do what we want to achieve for the next year. And that includes the school as well. So that one's really important, which is why we put it up near the front always.
That concludes our presentation, but if we have any more questions,
I just want to point out too that this town meeting guide, we tried to make a really concise 3-page, doesn't cover everything, but it covers a lot of stuff that if you were new to town meeting would need to know in order to participate. But this year, there's actually a QR code on the back of the warrant. When you go to town meeting, there's going to be a QR code on it, so you can actually scan it and pull it up on your phone. We're not going to be passing this document out in paper form, but you will be able to pull it up. And while on the back of the warrant that you'll receive when you check into town meeting, there's also a list of motions above and beyond the ones that are just printed here. We tried to highlight, 6 of them that are sort of ones that you traditionally hear, but there's all other types of motions, and they are printed on the back of the warrant. So for reference, you wanted to look at that. The QR code is a good addition, I think, because you'll be able to sit there and pull this up and sort of be able to follow along.
And I would say too, a year ago, town meeting adopted changes to our town charter, which is like our governing document on how the whole town's structured. Those changes have to work their way through the state legislature before they're official, so they haven't worked their way through yet. But we tried to prepare the warrant this year as if what people voted last year was in effect. So we actually have a new feature that we did at the special town meeting last fall, but we're going to do for the annual, is right in the reference material, every article has, as simply as we could state it in 1 or 2 sentences, what that article does. And then if there's a financial component, it says what the likely funding source is, and if it's coming from taxes, what the average impact would be on the average valued home versus the fiscal year that we're in now. And so that's all new and printed in the back of the warrant this year. Another requirement of the new town charter is that they want us to distribute at town meeting the motions that will be read that night. And if anyone's gone, I'm only looking at Heather because she's helps project that on the wall. So when we have the motions ready, we project it on the wall. Now we're going to try to hand out for everyone copies of the motions so they can follow it. I want to stress they're going to say draft on top, because for the same reasons we said before, at the last minute, if we find out something's wrong, we need that flexibility. And if we're printing, it's like 5 pages, and if we're printing 500 copies of it at our copier at 100 Route 6A, we're going to start that a couple days before town meeting to make sure we have those to hand out. So everyone should get that handout when you go to town meeting in a couple Mondays.
Do we have any, Heather, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I just want to say, I'm sure they all thanked you for coming here. We really appreciate you being here, and thanks to Taylor and Sean for making it happen. I just want to say, if you have questions about anything that you see on the warrant, don't hesitate to call any of us. We like to talk to you. We want to know what your questions are. If things come up and you feel like you're not ready to vote or don't feel comfortable as you're preparing for town meeting, contact us. I'm Heather Harper. I'm your assistant town manager. I work in Bud's office. You're welcome. You won't see me at town meeting. I'm down below hitting the slideshow, but I'm there.
I have to say too, Sandwich Community Television every year has one or two of us, or depending on what the topic is, tape something like a week or two beforehand, just to go through every article and try to say as simply as we can what they're about. And it's supposed to be informational, not begging you to vote for something one way or the other. So we just try to be factual.
Do we have any questions? Was that a question?
Time's up.
Well, no, I appreciate you all being here, and thank you to Sandwich Television for recording this. We're hoping to use this as a training tool moving forward.
It's definitely something we want to do year over year. So we'll kind of learn from this one
And move
you know,
forward. So,
yeah.
if the town meeting is coming up, it's on May 5th. We'll start at 7 o'clock at the Sandwich High School Auditorium, so please be there for that. That's the 2025 meeting, in case someone's watching this next year. I also want to thank George from Captain Seafood. When we're done here, he actually brought a nice spread of appetizers, so feel free to grab some food on your way out and socialize for a little bit. And Crystal and Bud and Sean, on behalf of us all, we appreciate you being here. And our effort is just to make this whole process of town meeting a little easier to understand and try to get more people to participate in it, and that is our end goal. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you all.